I would like to welcome you to this roundtable discussion, this panel discussion, dedicated to understanding the 2012 American presidential elections. We are fortunate to have with us today Professor Graham Dodds from the Department of Political Science, Professor Michael Lipson from the Department of Political Science, Professor Graham Carr, Vice President of Research and Graduate Studies, and in a few minutes, Professor Harold Chorney from the Department of Political Science will also be joining us. Professor Dodds is going to talk about the implications of the presidential election result for domestic politics. Dr. Lipson is going to discuss implications for US foreign policy. We asked Dr. Carr to discuss the implications of the elections for Canada and political culture, broadly conceived. And Dr. Chorney is going to discuss the implications of the results for the American economy. Without further ado, I turn the floor over to our first speaker, Dr. Graham Dodds.
Some quick thoughts, and I've sort of outlined them in terms of journalism, history, political science, sociology. I was going to do anthropology as well, but we'll leave that for later. So, journalism. It's been my impression as I talk to journalists and consume media, watch a lot of CNN, et cetera, that there's been a lot of talk about the implications of Tuesday for near-term political events. It's hard to see a newscast or read a story that doesn't have the word fiscal cliff in the first paragraph. And that's important, and that's something everyone should know about if you don't. But I think there's perhaps too little appreciation for the magnitude of what happened Tuesday in the aggregate. In other words, sure, it'll be back to business as usual very soon with big pressing issues. But it's not every day the U.S. elects a black liberal as president. It happened 4 years ago, and it was big news. It's still big news. As Joe Biden would say, it's a big effing deal. It really is, and people should be aware of that and think about it. It's profound. I still can't believe it happened 4 years ago, let alone 2 days ago. I think Obama's allowed a victory lap or two before we start to talk about the fiscal cliff, is what I'm trying to say.
So I think I'm on the program as speaking about implications of the election for foreign policy. I'm going to broaden that a bit and sort of talk about foreign policy and the election, and I'll start with implications of foreign policy for the election. So how did foreign policy affect the election? What role did it play in the campaigns? And it was not. It was by far not the leading issue in the either the campaigns or the election. And to the extent that it was generally seen as a plus for the Democrats and for Obama, which is unusual in recent historical memory. So I think that's often goes unremarked, but was worth noting. In exit polls, the percentage of people, there was one question in the exit polls was, here are 4 issues, which do you think was the most important in determining your vote? And the economy was overwhelmingly most important. Foreign policy was chosen by 5% of respondents in the exit polls. Those who said that foreign policy was their main issue and the main reason that they chose the candidate that they did went for Obama 56% to 33%. So where foreign policy came up in the campaign, in the debates, it was largely about the Obama administration's success in locating and killing Osama bin Laden, in keeping the promise to get the United States out of Iraq and to begin the process of withdrawing from Afghanistan, and the fact that there were no major crises on Obama's watch so far. And sort of the one real negative for Obama in terms of foreign policy was the controversy over the death of the American ambassador at the consulate in Benghazi, which I think that was used by the Romney campaign to rally its own supporters and partly to just have something to say about foreign policy, because Obama really did not leave a lot of room to attack him from the right on foreign policy.
I'm going to touch on 2 things, the implications of the election for Canada and I guess more generally the implications of the elections for political culture. In terms of the Canadian context, true to form, Canada did not loom large in the American debate around election 2012, with a couple of exceptions. The most notable was the specific policy around the Keystone XL pipeline and access to Nebraska, which was an issue that Mitt Romney raised very publicly in one of the televised debates, indicating that he would overturn the moratorium that the Obama administration had placed on the pipeline project. Obviously, Governor Romney didn't win the election, so the future of the moratorium remains open to question, and it's a fraught discussion topic in Canada and the United States, whether the pipeline itself should go ahead. The other specific Canadian policy issue that came up, not in the national election, but in the Michigan elections, had to do with a ballot initiative to stop a proposal to build a new bridge from Windsor to Detroit across the Detroit River, a bridge proposal that would be fully funded by the Government of Canada, would want to point out. And the owner of the existing Ambassador Bridge in linking the two cities had attempted to bring that project to a halt through a ballot initiative, but the ballot initiative failed. So those were probably the two most visible policy examples of Canada registering in the political discourse around election 2012. Now, I guess we could say that lack of attention could be construed as a good thing for Canadians, but I think it's revealing on a number of fronts.
Well, yes, he could. He won, which comes as a delight to those of us, and there are a few of us in the room, more than a few, I suspect, who are very delighted by the fact that Barack Obama has won a second term. Even though he has his faults, he's far from perfect, from my liberal instincts, but he's excellent despite that. And if you were up at 2 in the morning and saw the speech that he gave, which was an extremely powerful, rousing speech, rhetorically speaking, but also content-wise. It had a lot of content that was very important about the power of American democracy, the way in which democracy works, the necessity to dare to struggle, dare to win, an old slogan from the 60s, which I think is essentially what Obama practices, at great personal risk to himself and at great personal sacrifice. But now he's in a position where, as George Bush famously said after winning an even smaller mandate against John Kerry, I have some political capital now and I intend to spend it. And so any time that he does things that the Republicans don't like, he should remind them of what Bush said and acted upon. However, there's a side to President Obama that's also quite conservative fiscally, and that's the whole fiscal cliff disaster that is embedded in this deal they made, a very bad deal, in my view, which says that unless they come to major agreements on how to restructure quote-unquote entitlements, a very ideologically loaded term, actually you're talking about people's benefits that they've worked for, paid taxes for, believed in for most of their lives, and in addition to health care for the elderly and for the poor. So, though they claim that that's not going to be touched, but once you start cutting to appease Republican political interests, you're going to get into trouble very swiftly, particularly if Boehner means what he says, and I think he does, that they think they have a mandate to prevent tax increases from occurring. So it's going to be an interesting struggle. I think we'll have to see how this works itself out.
I would like to thank each and every one of you for showing up, engaging us in a very intellectually, very exciting conversation with our panelists about trying to understand the seemingly incomprehensible. What exactly happened in the United States just a couple of days ago and what it means for our collective future. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Relations and Advancement, as well as the Department of Political Science, I would like to thank each and every one of our panelists for taking time away from their extremely busy and important schedules to spend these last 2 hours with us. So Dr. Carr, Dr. Chorney, Dr. Dodds, Dr. Lipson, thank you. Please join me in a round of applause.